This is the unrestricted free agent.
Oh, he's just going to go out there and kill him.
Wow. Welcome into the program. Glad you're here. And I just pulled my microphone completely off the table.
Oh, I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do. Not what we've seen so far. They haven't closed the gap.
Defense, I'm going to tell you right now, they're nasty. They're going to be nasty all year.
You know, I want to repent and apologize. I haven't really seen that.
When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that.
And LC, I told you, it's all about the deer talk.
How about that for a start? Not a great sign on September 22nd when you got to edit the open for a few preseason predictions that haven't looked great. Welcome in. How's your Thursday morning so far? Mine's a little slow, moving a little slow around my house. Hope I'm coming in loud and clear for you. That'll make me feel a little bit better this morning. Coffee cup number 2. Hope your well-oiled morning machine is running a little smoother than mine. DC, I don't think you disappeared this morning. 5:35, you were in before 5:35 with a different comment. Impressive. Anthony with a good morning UFAs. Teddy D, how about that? He's going to be our President Cup correspondent, clearly. Is everybody else as excited as I am? I don't think so, Teddy. Morning to the Tonester. What did you guys think yesterday? The conversation continues. Again, it's a rough spot to be in from the Gamecock football standpoint. Offensive struggles. Charlotte, South Carolina State before the SEC gauntlet hit, before 6 straight in the SEC. So I don't think anybody had high expectations yesterday. With coordinator press conferences, defensive coordinator Clayton White, offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield for the Gamecock. But if you are grizzled, if you are one of those fans who thought, hey man, 8-4, 9-3, that's definitely what this team is going to be in year number 2 of Shane Beamer, and you have now seen what you've seen through 3 games, I can understand a bit of that hate listening that is pretty popular these days. You just go into something just to listen to it to be angry. There are just certain shows that I feel like conservative talk radio, by and large, is that, isn't it? Like, you really turn that on to feel better about life. Like maybe you turn it on to other people are kicked off to. It's such an angry medium. And there are those sports talk radio guys too who are just that's their style, right? They're going to say how kicked off they are with the world every single day. Man, and I say this as a guy who started yesterday's show, a bit of a rant about how we put information out there, how we take information in 2022. Thanks for the heads up, Chris. Now I'm going to be a privileged guy with muffled audio. Let's start Marcus Satterfield, offensive coordinator yesterday. What do you do? How do you handle it when you are pressing clearly the Gamecock offense should be and has done and hasn't worked out the way here's the exchange of yesterday's press conference.
How do you, as an offensive coordinator, kind of balance pressing versus still staying patient within the game plan, even when things aren't going well?
It's a great question. I think that's a unique tool and quality that you have to develop. Obviously you're going to press a little bit, and the urgency is going to continue to grow a little bit throughout that game, the way it was playing out. But I think he just has to trust his abilities and trust the guys around him that eventually, there's going to be some plays made that get us back in the game.
All right. How about now? Loud and clear? Hope so. Thanks for all the feedback to start this morning. DC, Chris, Mac, Teddy D. See you guys. How do you balance it when you know you gotta be better, but you don't want to press? It's a great environment to test that hypothesis this week, isn't it? All right. Thumbs up. Appreciate you guys engineering the show. Thank you. Because you can't just beat Charlotte this weekend. You can't just win the game. It is different. There is a different expectation. And having this one at home, I can't tell you how many times I've been in Williams-Brice Stadium, and you just get the feeling at some point, and I think it will happen very quickly. The frustration, I mean, go back through the years, right? It has been there a lot of times. Let's see. When's the last time? I think that when it's most palpable is when there's a quarterback who doesn't have an offense on track, and there is an unproven guy, a guy, typically a freshman quarterback, waiting in the wings, and people get, I mean, that's certainly not a South Carolina specific thing, but the people get all worked up and like, oh, just change quarterbacks and everything will be great. And there are very few examples of that happening. Steve Tannehill kind of removed, right? But when your team is struggling to get going, we saw a lot of this recently where frustration is aimed at a coaching staff, offensively mostly, but then also defensively at the end of the Muschamp era. It can be a rough home environment. So those elements certainly present themselves for the 7:30 kick against Charlotte this Saturday night, knowing that Charlotte, Shane Beamer said it himself yesterday, they scored more points against Georgia State than we did. They did it at Georgia State too, which is, again, difficult for my – it's one of those sentences, well, I say out loud, my brain tries to stop me, or it has a difficult time understanding. There wasn't anything said yesterday's press conference that stuck out to me in a massive way, but it was clear to me that Marcus Satterfield is not changing. He is who he is, and that can be a good thing. That's a good quality to have in a coach, right? You don't panic. You don't try to reinvent the wheel if something's not working. I think what it really comes down to is how much do you believe, how much do you trust Shane Beamer, who's in charge, ultimate responsibility, right? And then the guy that he chose, I don't know how far down the list, but the guy who he gave the job to. He wasn't the first choice, obviously. Mike Bobo, at least, seems like the first choice, who got the job originally. And then it was open, and then Marcus Satterfield comes in from the Carolina Panthers, where he was assistant offensive line coach. And the resume certainly much different than Mike Bobo. The public reputation nearly non-existent, especially compared to a guy who was a SEC quarterback, longtime SEC coordinator, had already been with the Gamecocks for a year. DC says, I know the offense has to get a lot better, but I'm more worried about the defense. The defense, though, is more explainable for sure. And I think you have seen much more consistent production from that side of the ball in 16 games into the Shane Beamer era than on offense, right? And we, as a football public, are just going to talk about offense more than defense. We just are. That's just how it works, right? So my question to you is, how much do you trust when you hear Shane Beamer say, guys, we just had the entire offense on Sunday. Instead of position groups, the entire offense sat and watched the video of the Georgia game, and we showed them. They saw how close we are. When you hear Marcus Satterfield say something similar yesterday, how much do you believe him?
again, it just takes work. I know that's the boring answer and everybody rolls their eyes, but I mean, you just have to keep working and you have to keep getting timing together and you have to keep playing games and you have to keep screwing up and figuring out why you screwed up and getting that fixed. So I honestly, truly believe that we're getting really close based on, I mean, our kids are great. I mean, they are freaking bought into our process. They're bought into the way we practice. They're bought into our plan. I mean, they're up here all the time. They're up here last night, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, trying to bully their way into personnel groupings on third downs. I mean, we have a good time together. We work hard. We fight. We make up. We laugh. So, I mean, it's a strong, strong group. Had a great meeting today, and just, I think we're getting close. It just, nobody wants to hear it. It just takes time and takes a lot of hard work.
Do you buy it? If that bowl game had not have happened, I think the very easy answer to that is absolutely not. I think nearly 100%. But the bowl game did happen. There was plenty of offensive production there. I'd throw in as a 1B example the Florida game last year. A couple of guys running for more than 100 yards against what at the time was a 19th ranked team in the country. I get it. There were certain stipulations going in, some sick Florida players. Clearly, Dan Mullen had kind of lost control at that point. I understand. But you still get credit as an offensive coordinator for a game where you have offensive production. When I hear that now, when I heard that yesterday, my initial reaction was, oh, I feel like I've heard that before. I feel like that has always been the explanation for the last several years, and this is clearly Muschamp era baggage, right? Of, just got to change, got to do the little things better and the whole deal. And then I started to zoom out. I was wondering, what about from an offensive coordinator standpoint? Craig's not buying it either. He says, good morning, Timothy. Good morning to you, Craigus. Blah, 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 Sat. I want to fight you too. Yes, and he's obviously salty. Offensive coordinators, though, I don't know of a ton of examples where it just starts to go and you just see an offense through a full season, then take a significant step several games into a second season. Good morning to you, Kens. Thanks for hopping on, man. How can I not be salty, DC? Well, you can understand it was Georgia, right? You can be optimistic that Arkansas is a good football team. You can say that Georgia State had a lot to prove with Sean Elliott and personal connections in game number 1. Carolina won by 21 points. They're playing a team that just beat that team by 1 point, but now you're at home. You got a couple of weeks to get right. Plenty to prove after that embarrassing performance last week. Or you can just be salty. That's up to you. Up to you, Craig. We're learning a lot about people this week. DC says, I'm with you. I'm salty too. Yeah, no one's been saltier, I don't think, than DC these last couple of days on the show. But my ultimate point after hearing that from Marcus Satterfield yesterday was, did we hear that? Or is that really true from offensive coordinators, from certainly really, really good offensive coordinators? Josh Heupel didn't need a lot of time to get Tennessee rolling last year. I get it. They did need some time to find Hendon Hooker and kind of kick that thing into one of the best offenses in the country. But I think they were still scoring points. It was still obvious that they had a system that was going to be much, much better than what they had before. Lane Kiffin, wherever he's been, it hadn't taken him a lot of time to score points. Lincoln Riley, all of a sudden, Southern Cal can just pretty much put up whatever number it seems like they want to on offense. Where's that been? It didn't take these guys a ton of time. Kansas this year, great example, Craig. He also mentions Duke and Syracuse with good offenses. They can't have better athletes. And You can't do it game 1 against Georgia State. Saw a little bit of improvement against Arkansas, but Arkansas is 131 in the country out of 131 in pass defenses through 3 games. What are you going to see game 4 and game 5? We talked about acceptable performances. What would be an acceptable performance against Georgia going in, knowing it was a 24.5-point spread? I don't know if we ever came up with a consensus on that answer, but from my perspective, it was competing, especially be in the game at halftime, right? And we all saw that that didn't happen. It was, I don't think anybody could watch that game connected to Carolina football in any sort of way and say, yeah, that was acceptable. Craig says, Heupel took over a disaster, much worse than what our staff inherited. Has his team 11th in 16 games there. Yeah, and the offense is leading the way, surprisingly to me. And DC, going with that comparison to Tennessee, bad situation with a new coach. They took a right, we took a left. Oh, I don't know about that. You can't say that it's gotten worse with Shane Beamer. That's what I hear when I hear that they went the right way and you went the other way. That's not right, DC. Easy on that. They both finished with the same record last year. I get it. Tennessee completely dominated the Gamecocks. Josh Heupel obviously has the Vols in a much better position right now than South Carolina's in, but I'm still talking about 16 games in. Remember, Ryan Leaf was a better NFL quarterback early on in his career than Peyton Manning was. Maybe coaching in the SEC is not a direct comparison to playing quarterback in the NFL. I'm just saying the book is far from written on both of these guys. And I understand being ticked off and salty after that last game. Yeah, this is interesting. So Craig's gone to the stats, 39 touchdowns for Hendon Hooker, 3 interceptions. Rattler's got 4 interceptions in 3 games. Well, that's probably the best number in the country, right? Hooker, 39 and 3. It's tough to get much better than that. And Troy, I think it's arguable. I'm with Craig on this one though. I would have much rather taken the South Carolina job at the time than the Tennessee job. Just with the mess from an NCAA perspective hanging over the Jeremy Pruitt exit, the massive expectation and the lack of meeting that for 3 coaches in a row, as opposed to 1 failed coach at South Carolina, infrastructure being in place, some pieces to work with. DC says Kansas is a head scratcher. That place was at the bottom for sure. Well, no, it's pretty simple, DC. New coach, Lance Leipold, Buffalo, proven, showing that he can do it. Can do more with less. You got to have an offensive coordinator at South Carolina. When's the last time that's happened? Even the great Steve Spurrier, I don't know if he earned the reputation at South Carolina of doing more with less on offense. Maybe it's because he was able to recruit as many good guys, especially on the outside, that wasn't the reputation for the Gamecocks when you got Alshon Jeffrey on the outside, right? When you got Marcus Lattimore running the football, they had as much talent as anybody. But I got to go back to maybe Sparky Woods, the run and shoot back in the day. Maybe the early days of Brad Scott, spreading that thing out. Maybe doing a little bit more with less from a scheme perspective. Running the spread at that point was really, really new in college football. You haven't seen it in South Carolina in a long time on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah, all the transfers there for DC. DC pointing out to Troy when Josh Heupel took over. Yeah, it was a mess. Absolute mess. Much more volatile, I think, than what had happened in South Carolina, even though there was plenty of volatility, right? And speaking of that, that's been part of this week as well. The Josh Van podcast clip made the made the rounds on social media where he says not to throw a coach under the bus, but 1 third down call at Arkansas, we hadn't been over that play in 3 weeks. I think this is telling, and it took me a while to think about it, but I'm interested in seeing and hearing what you guys think about the explanation when Marcus Satterfield was asked about that, if he had talked to his leading returning receiver from last year, Josh Vann, about the clip that had been circulating where he basically questioned the coach publicly.
He came up here last night and was like, I need to apologize to you. I was like, I thought he was talking about a route. I was like, oh, you're good, man. You're good. And then he left, and then someone had sent me a text. And I texted, I was like, oh, that's what you were going to apologize about. I wish I'd have known that then. But no, I mean, that happens. We have a series of plays in a certain formation that's just kind of a base play for us. They gave us the exact look that we wanted, or that we needed in order for that play to be successful, and I called it. And we hadn't repped it in about 3 weeks, so I shouldn't have done it. But I can't promise you I won't do it again. I'll try not to, but we have base plays that have to be able to carry over from week to week.
The football explanation makes sense, right? But completely overanalyzing this. So I found it interesting that he went to kind of defense mode, right? Let me defend why I called what I called, which you don't have to do as an offensive coordinator, right? But you certainly can explain it. It makes sense. I think this is part of the positive of being able to hear from coordinators during the season that Shane Beamer offers Gamecock fans, right? Say, oh, I get that. That makes sense. You should know a base play. The offensive coordinator thinks it's a base play. You run it many, many times. Then you should absolutely be able to go to that on third down, even though you haven't practiced it in a few weeks. Got it. But after thinking about it even more, listening to it maybe a time or two, it dawned on me like there was a miscommunication there. That clearly the relationship needs a little work if Josh Vann comes to his coach and says, hey, man, I got to apologize. And that's kind of the extent of the conversation. And the coach leaves with the impression that the kid was apologizing for one thing that wasn't what it was about. They couldn't even get to what the issue was when they were having the communication. And I think it's very clear that Marcus Satterfield has a solid reputation of knowing the X's and O's. And you just listen to him at all. Clearly, he knows offensive football from an X's and O's standpoint. When I hear Eric Kimry say, it was kind of intimidating to see how much Marcus Satterfield knows about offense. Well, then I know that he knows a lot about football, knows a lot about the offense. When Shane Beamer hires him to be the offensive coordinator, I think you can know that there's plenty of knowledge there. There's plenty of brain power there. But anyone who's ever taken a class in college knows just because you have a lot of knowledge or brain power doesn't make you a good professor, doesn't make you a good teacher, doesn't make you able to translate that knowledge in an effective way. And if you're having difficulty, if you can't get an apology from a receiver to a player to a coach, that's a problem, man. No, Craig, easy. Calling him a liar. Easy, Craig. I think you're taking the saltiness to another level. I don't think he was telling us something that's not true at all. I completely could see that happening, right? Like, I mean, first of all, it's uncomfortable when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need to apologize to you, right? It's uncomfortable for me anyway. Like, I don't know what happens in my brain and my body. I'm like, this is going to be one of those. Eesh. How can I make this as easy as possible? Or clearly the person coming to me is uncomfortable, right? Let's make this as the best for both of us as we can. And It seems like that's what Satterfield was trying to do to me. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But then to not get the message or to leave with a completely unclear communication there, that makes me think that can happen. That's not the first time that's happened. T. Farr, he just had COVID. I'm assuming you're over it now. He said that was more enjoyable than watching this offense. Easy. And Craig's just continues the saltiness. I'm not buying it. You're not buying what? That there was a miscommunication there. You're just saying that's the story Satterfield came up with in the Josh Van situation, which I think is completely overblown. Again, I say this, unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience saying this. When a team is not playing well, do you want everybody to be happy from a coach and player standpoint? You think that's how it is? If you just watch, does it look like everybody's pulling in the same direction and on the same page and things are running smoothly? It is obvious. No, he did. Craig, he didn't have to know about the clip at that point. Yeah, that I completely think. He said, "Hey, coach, I need to apologize." He's like, "No, yeah, you're good." Oh, I'm good? Cool. As a player, I would think that he's probably thinking what you're thinking, Craig, that, yeah, he'd already seen the clip and he knew about it. He's just making it easy on me. Sweet. Out of here. Whew. That was easy. And if DC's saying you need a hug, Craig, whew. I like DC. It seems like you mellowed out a little bit from yesterday. That's good. I'm hopeful that maybe this can be part of the healing process. Maybe Craig's a day behind. We're doing it today. Good. Maybe not, though. If I keep playing Marcus Satterfield clips, it might go the other way. The offense is close. I'm not saying I don't completely buy it. It's a difficult sell right now. I don't know what it's going to take for Gamecock fans to come around on that. It's not going to take 700 yards this week against Charlotte. You say that was Charlotte. Their defense stinks anyway. It's not going to – you put up 1,500 yards combined in the next 2 weeks. No rational Gamecock fan out there is going to say, oh, yeah, offense is fixed. We're good. No problems there. It's clicked now. They were close, and now they're there. It's going to take some of that. I just brought up that number because I think that's an absurd amount of offense to even consider, especially for an offense that had, 306 total yards against Georgia State. I'd say a much more reasonable goal, 500 yards, would be a fantastic performance for this offense. You do that 2 weeks in a row, you get 1,000 combined yards. You get right? You get somewhere close to even on the season. From a massive hole, you get out of the 100s in nearly every offensive category when you're talking about national rankings out of 131. But it's a sliding scale, right? Knowing that you're playing against teams that you should be able to move the football against as an SEC team. So I think it's going to take that kind of baseline. It's going to take a good performance. You don't perform well offensively against Charlotte and SC State. I mean, you don't perform dominantly, I should say. Then the confidence level, the criticism. You think Craig's salty now? Eke out a couple of wins the next couple of weeks and then get thumped against Kentucky, get shut down against Kentucky, and I think Craig's got the pitchfork out. He's leading the mob to Williams-Brice Stadium. There we go. We're clearly in a safe space. You're good, Craig. Let it out. Sorry, y'all. I can't keep hearing we are close when I'm watching what I'm watching. DC says, I'm just starting to accept that we're trash. You guys are in a bad spot. Oh, okay, Chris, you want to hear that one? Getting the ball to playmakers. I was going to do that anyway. Well done, Chris. Excellent transition on the Facebook live stream this morning. The first question asked at yesterday's press conference, Chris says, was how do you get the ball in playmakers' hands? His answer looks like a slap on the face. Is that the emoji? Well, let's hear Marcus Satterfield's answer about getting the ball to his playmakers on offense.
The defense we played did a really nice job of being aware, especially where Jaheim was, and could play coverage over top of him most of the game. So we got to get used to that. And I think Jaheim took a huge step. He made some really, really good plays without the ball, blocking and doing some of those things, which now when he's out there, I think people have to, will have to look at him a little bit differently because he's not just out there touching the ball. He's doing a lot of really nice things in the run game. And so that was huge. But I think, we can design all these plays and stuff, but we have to go out there, get open, get the ball to them. And, if coverage dictates it, we can't force it.
To me, that is who Marcus Satterfield has been. Didn't cause me to slap my head. You guys heard it differently? It wasn't a tremendous answer. No, the very first answer you're saying, Chris, well, if I didn't even edit it together, I didn't even find it worth popping in there. What'd you hear, Chris? Tell us about it. TC already putting out numbers. 45-21. Anything less is a disappointment against Charlotte. Greg, former Gamecock Kelsey Quarles called a show yesterday, said he threw his phone through the wall watching the Georgia game, said they play with no heart. Well, you heard Corey Miller on Monday, right? If you didn't, go back and check that thing out on the YouTube channel. Corey's pumped. Not pumped. Fired up. And you could hear it in Rick Sanford's voice yesterday, too. Former players. And I know Rick said, well, that's not embarrassing for me. That was them. As fans, you have really high expectations. And have you guys seen, I think there's a social media video out there of poor Bears fan crying when the Packers lost the other night. And then after the game, Justin Fields says, no, fans don't feel it as bad as players. We're the one putting in the work, and that was not the right thing to say, and he tried to walk it back and the whole deal. There are plenty of passionate fans in every football fan base. South Carolina fans are way up the totem pole, in my opinion. Multiple ways, right? First of all, just support 78,000 strong against Georgia State and Georgia this year in your two home games. But secondly, supporting a team that has not given them championships. It's not easy to do. Especially in 2022 where you got all the options in the world, right? Maybe back when I was growing up, to be an old guy rant this morning, when there were only a handful of college football games on per week. And you couldn't just pop on your phone and see what your team was doing instantly and the whole thing. It's maybe a little bit more difficult to switch allegiances or just pick a team out there, other than if you're just going to hop on like Notre Dame, one you could watch every week. But now, my kids could be fans of any program pretty much in the country they want to be a fan of. They want to be Liberty fans. You can watch a Liberty game almost every single week, right? But former players lived it. And it's one thing for a fan to be embarrassed or to see an embarrassing performance and say, man, I really hoped it would go better than that. I really pull for this team. I'm there for them in spirit. I kind of put my emotions into game day and talk about it a lot during the week and the season, the off season, the whole thing. It's another thing for a guy like Kelsey Quarles, who played in the trenches, grew up in the state of South Carolina, is identified as a Gamecock. And to see that go down like it did, I get it, man. I'm guessing he probably wasn't the only one. And football players tend to be emotional a lot of times, on the whole, I would say. Ken's, Rattler needs 0 interceptions these next 2 weeks. He has had some really questionable throws to start the year. To be fair, he hasn't had the best protection, but still. See, to me, that doesn't come down to an interception thing. This comes down to an improvement thing. This was another head scratcher yesterday, but I think it does sum up Marcus Satterfield. And Chris giving us a little bit more of his take, I think, saying we got to call plays where they're out there and we call their number. They've got to run their routes and get open. That's what he said before that clip you played. That's why I used that emoji. Yeah, that was interesting for sure. And yes, Craig, Kelsey Quarles lost 6 games in his career. He was in the 11-2 seasons. Yeah, much different, right? Much different time. 33-6, pretty good record, right? Same record as Davian Clowney. It's not insane, though, Kens. We saw it happen. It's possible. But you got to have an offense that can move the football. You got to have an offensive coordinator who is putting players in position to move the football. This was fascinating, I thought. Asked about his starting quarterback, the transfer, Spencer Rattler. Here's Marcus Satterfield, yesterday's weekly press conference.
How would you evaluate his play, and what's maybe next for his game as you get into these last 9?
I'm excited. Every single week he screws something up. I'm sure I've said this before, but he screws something up, and then he spends the whole following week fixing it. And then he'll screw something up this weekend, and he'll spend next week fixing it. It's just been really cool to see his work ethic and his understanding that, the good thing about him is he knows he doesn't know everything. And so he's just attacking this thing each week. Like, we know there's going to be issues, and we're going to fix them the following week. So I'm excited because he's played, he hasn't played a lot of layup games per se. He's played 3 really talented defenses. And, the last 2, one on the road and then this Georgia bunch, that's about as good as you can get. And the way he played and handled himself and kept his head and was never lost his mind, I think is a sign of good things to come.
That was fascinating, man. First of all, the beginning, I'm excited. Every week he's screwing something up. Just to put those 2 sentences together, to have that thought process, I think that's different. But from a coaching perspective, I can wrap my brain around that. Or maybe it was covering Frank Martin for years and say, yeah, I don't really enjoy games. I love practice. I love teaching the game. And I think that's what that mindset is, right? Okay, you make a mistake, then you get to correct it, move forward, ultimately improve. Oh, I got that one. But then towards the end there, he hasn't lost his mind. That's a positive. I got nothing for you on that one, man. That was. Now Craig says he's making himself cry. So by week 12, he'll screwed up 12 times. Great. Oh, we need you, Roger, with your sunny outlook on the good morning. Jason, maybe this team plays with heart. Maybe they don't. But it always seems like an easy answer to say they have no heart when maybe the answer is they just aren't very good. And I think that's what you saw Shane Beamer reacting to when he was questioned by Phil Kornblut after the game. Did you sense any give up in the locker room? He said, get out of here. Nope. Not part of the program. Oh. Okay, but it was a valid question based off of the performance on the field. Chris says maybe it's because of these things that are said is the reason why Muschamp didn't let his coordinator speak. LOL. That was a fascinating answer, man. Just fascinating. And to me, what I heard there actually was the difference in a coordinator's perspective and the difference in a head coach's perspective. Like, I don't think a head coach can even think that way, but a coordinator can. And I think if you need an explanation to why Will Muschamp didn't work out as a head coach, I think an answer like that or a viewpoint, a perspective like that is a good reason why that's just not how you can look at a whole team, right? But it is how Marcus Satterfield can look at things. He's got the luxury of just being in charge of the offense. And ultimately, he doesn't have to necessarily be the motivator. He's got to be the guy who has got the sharp number 2 pencil, as Corey Miller would say, right? Scheme it up. So I guess you can have that mindset. But it seems to be a strange one, or maybe it just came out a little strange to me. I don't know. So plenty more from Marcus Satterfield, Gamecock football, as we roll on. I'm interested in hearing more of your thoughts. I'm not interested in making you more miserable. Clemson's game this week is much more interesting on paper for sure. Taking on a ranked team, taking on a team that's been much improved in the ACC, taking on a quarterback, one of the best in the country, I think it's fair to say, in Sam Hartman, who's coming off of odd health issue, blood clot, kept him out in the season opener, came back, and then Wake didn't play very well last week. Could have gotten beat by Liberty on a 2-point conversion. They go with a reverse pass that was never a pass and never got close. And you got Clemson, ranked number 5 in the country, coming off of one of the most dominant runs we've seen in college football with 6 straight ACC championships, a couple of national championships, playing for another one, college football playoff every year. And then last year happened where, especially at the beginning of the year, they didn't look like anything close to what those other teams have been. Still end up winning 10 games. Have the same quarterback back from last year. Have a bunch of the skill guys back. I think it's fair to say haven't been dominant this year. And now they go to Wake Forest, where Wake hasn't beaten a ranked Clemson team since 1945. I think I saw the stat. They've won an absurd amount of games in the series in a row. Clemson has 9, 11. I don't even know the number off the top of my head. A bunch. But I said it yesterday. We'll certainly stand by it. If Clemson doesn't win this game, to me, I take them out of that elite group. I have them in there now. I can give you a 1-year hiccup. I mean, especially when you win double-digit games. I've seen their defensive line this year. That looks a lot like the defensive lines we've seen in the past for Clemson dominate. The offense has not. I guess maybe it did for about a quarter and a half in that Georgia Tech game. But Georgia Tech stinks. Ole Miss showed us that last week. Jeff Collins is not going to be there very much longer. There's a wish list at Georgia Tech. There's a wish list at Auburn. These programs, it seems pretty clear for those of us looking from the outside that there will be a transition in the near future from a coaching perspective. Well, Wake's on the other end of the coaching spectrum, right? Dave Clawson is on those lists. Their coach is highly coveted because if you win at Wake Forest in football, the theory's got to be you can win anywhere. If Wake can beat Clemson this week, that program, to me, jumps up in a big way. Been a nice story, cute. Been doing some good things there. Haven't made that national splash with a win like this because it hasn't happened. They got the chance to do that tomorrow or Saturday, noon. Winston-Salem. I don't have much confidence it's going to happen. Clemson just a 7-point favorite, though. Vegas doesn't have a ton of confidence that Clemson's going to run away with this thing. And I don't think you can with what you've seen so far. But a fascinating place to be. I know Troy says he's concerned about this game. I think every Clemson fan is to some degree. Because I think they probably have a much higher standard for what they've seen recently than even people on the outside. And I think there is very much much like from the Gamecock perspective, there is a confidence crisis, especially on offense. There is that amongst the Clemson fan base with their quarterback situation. I think there is a strong percentage of Clemson fans who are ready to move on from DJU and saying, nope, he's not going to be our guy. Cade Klubnik is going to be the guy. Let's get him in there. Make the change. Week 4, it's happened before. Happened with Deshaun Watson. Happened with Trevor Lawrence. Pull the trigger, Dabo, I think a lot of Clemson fans are saying. And I think it will happen if you see Clemson struggle early on with Wake. I'll be surprised if they just stick with DJU without giving Klubnik a chance. I think it'll happen. If. That's a big if. I don't think that if is going to happen, though. I think Clemson still has enough. Who out of the ACC would you swap Clemson with if they lose? Nobody. I'm not putting anybody else from the ACC up in that elite category, DC. Don't get it wrong. You don't automatically just get thrown in the elite because somebody comes out. That elite gets smaller. If sometimes there are 4 teams in there, 5 and 6, I think we've seen here in the last few years that kind of separate themselves from the rest of college football. Sometimes they're 2. Sometimes it's 1. I mean, it's why you can have a pretty legit argument about the way that college football does decide its national champion. It's why there are a bunch of people out there adamant that expanding the college football playoff to 12 is ultimately bad for the sport. I'm not one of those guys, but I understand where they're coming from. I think it's a legitimate conversation, a legitimate opinion to have. So no one, DC, especially this year, right? Pitt was the defending champ. NC State was supposed to be maybe a team on the rise that could challenge, and they don't seem to be nearly there. But nationally, it seems like Michigan's getting pretty close, doesn't it? When they beat Ohio State last year, I think that put everybody on notice that maybe Jim Harbaugh has finally kind of broken down that door and figured it out. Agreed. You guys talking Gamecock, Larry. Ken says, have you heard from him? Craig says, no, he's still calling in 107.5. He should call into this show. Love his voice. Absolutely, Ken's. But and yeah, we don't really do calls, but I could give him the link. He's got the tablet. We could make it happen. I don't know if it would be the same mystique, though. All right, so we talked Clemson, Wake. What about Florida, Tennessee? As a Gamecock fan, how do you want this thing to go down? There is no scenario that I can think of that would be a great one for Carolina here. Because make no doubt about it, this was the year, the conversation, 2 through 6 in the SEC East, that seems awfully muddled. Well, it doesn't anymore, does it? 3 weeks in? Kentucky seems pretty good. Florida couldn't beat Kentucky, but they beat Utah. Seems like they're a lot better than we thought they might be. Tennessee has been, I think in a lot of ways, as impressive as you would hope they could be if you're a Tennessee fan. So what is a good scenario here? I don't think there is one. Though the one team in the SEC East mix, I guess 2 teams, Missouri as well, clearly have separated themselves as 5 and 6 in the league, haven't they? Through 3 games. Again, this is just through 3 games. It's not in stone at all. A lot can happen in long season. All of those coaching cliches, they still exist. Florida, you beat Utah. Anthony Richardson looks good. Instant statement for Billy Napier. Now, since then, a bit of a struggle, right? You lose to Kentucky at home. That never used to happen. It's a different SEC East. You barely beat South Florida at home. Cause for major concern. So I would think, from that perspective, South Carolina is much closer to the Florida program seemingly right now than Tennessee or Kentucky. but I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if you want that to happen, to keep happening here. I think maybe what you would prefer to see is neither offense looking very good, sharp, a penalty filled game where neither team can get much rhythm going or something like that. Because I don't think I've seen that from a Tennessee offense. Seems like they're going to score points. What's the over-under in this game? Thinking it's got to be in the 60s. I'm going to check that real quick. If you guys can check it faster than me, go right ahead. And I assume Tennessee is a slight favorite at home. Checking it right now. Ooh, big favorite. 10.5 and 62 is the over-under. Tennessee favored by 10.5. Woo. So if that happens, if Tennessee wins this game by 10, I think they solidified themselves as a top 10 program right now under Josh Heupel, and that is not a good thing for the Gamecocks. That's one of those things you talked about, Kelsey Quarles and the record and the whole deal. Well, part of going 33-6 is being the second best team in the SEC East for 3 years. You got to be. I mean, there's not a lot of wiggle room there, right? If you're consistently getting beat by one program, well, that's one loss per year. You can only lose one other. But beating Tennessee and Florida and Georgia relatively consistently in those years, it seems like both programs are headed in the right direction right now. Both of these we're talking about, Florida and Tennessee. And clearly through 3 games, after that last game, nobody is confident the Gamecocks are headed in the right direction. We hear the coaches. They're close. I think you got to say that. Well, that would be the worst public messaging ever. Right? We weren't even close. That would be something Steve Spurrier might say, right? I don't know what they were doing. We got to get other guys. But this coaching staff, a different approach. Pulling for Tennessee because I'm not a Napier fan at all, DC says. Craig says 38-17 Tennessee. Well, I think that would give you much more confidence that you could be 4th in the East, I guess. And maybe that's the most realistic right now because Kentucky hadn't been that close, right, in recent years. Maybe you kind of concede 2 and 3 to Kentucky and Tennessee, and you're fighting for that 4th spot. That's probably the most realistic. But I do find it hard to believe that South Carolina this year, I would have found it much harder to believe going into the year that you're just going to concede after 3 weeks that, yeah, Kentucky and Tennessee are double digits better than you in 2022. But it seems like that right now. If South Carolina was playing at Tennessee, I think that spread would be more like 13.5 instead of 10.5. Maybe more than that. I don't know. I think the over-under would probably be higher too. And for those of you really concerned about the South Carolina defense, I get it. Would typically play Clayton White clips after the defensive coordinator press conference yesterday as well. Had a technical issue there, so couldn't get those prepared for you today. What he had to say about turnovers was really interesting, I thought. Because first, you got to be in position to get turnovers. So that seems to be a bit of a frustration. You got to make sure that you're not doing too much with inexperienced players on defense. You mentioned that. Because the true freshman on the field last week, kind of an alarming stat, I think, in a lot of ways. A bunch of them out there. Just from the depth perspective, when you have 5 starters out, that's how it goes. And now taking on, I think from a scheduling standpoint, you can't ask for much better. I get it. Charlotte put up a bunch of points. They've got a very experienced quarterback, but you should be much more talented than Charlotte. Just simple. You should be able to make plays. You should be able to get some turnovers this week and next week, Charlotte and South Carolina State. So from the scheduling standpoint, I think especially from the defensive standpoint, this is about as ideal as it could be for South Carolina with so many guys questionable. And I think that goes into it as well. I don't think the program needs some of these injured guys back as much these next 2 weeks as you would, obviously, in an SEC game the following week against Kentucky, for instance. Maybe that will allow for a little extra healing, will allow for talented guys on the depth chart getting some playing time, getting an opportunity, and stepping up and making plays. Maybe it'll happen. It needs to happen, especially after last week. But from the turnover perspective, yeah, that's always an interesting conversation, especially for a coach that has been on both sides of it, right? Will Muschamp was that guy. Year number 1, especially in the Muschamp era, really good at forcing turnovers. Got a lot of credit for coaching that way, right? The rest of the tenure, it wasn't the same. Coaching didn't change. Just to me, it's kind of college football. It's football in general. It kind of cycles in, cycles out a lot of times, unless you just have consistently really, really dominant players on that side of the ball. And even then, sometimes you just don't get turnovers. But if you had to pick one stat in that year number 1 under Shane Beamer, that was the one, right? That was the most important one. And it's not even close. Defensive turnovers forced. Help the Gamecocks have a winning record. The main cause of that. And just having one turnover through 3 games. Now, Clayton White did mention that they've had turnovers on downs. So in his mind, those are turnovers as well. And they should get credit for it. But they aren't the instant game-changing plays that we saw last year at East Carolina, a pick 6, Troy, a pick 6, that, I mean, really did help Carolina avoid disaster in a lot of ways. Man, I didn't need to see this, Roger says. Just now looking at the games coming up on Saturday, see the start time of Coastal and Georgia State. Saw Georgia State is 0-3. Our only win, and they're 0-3. Well, Roger, those first 2 losses, I think anybody around the Georgia State program was probably anticipating, not hoping for. Ideally, you could pull an upset, but you lose by 7 to North Carolina. You lose in a competitive game to South Carolina. You're Georgia State. You're feeling good about your program. Now, the home loss to Charlotte in game number 3. If you haven't been paying attention to Sean Elliott, that's something that has happened relatively frequently in his tenure at Georgia State, that Gamecock fans who want to tell you that Sean Elliott's a great Gamecock, and he's from Camden, and they should have hired him instead of Will Muschamp, and he definitely would have done much better in the whole thing. Well, that's an easy thing to ignore if you're of that mindset, right? But reality has been that's been part of the Georgia State program with Sean Elliott there, and part of most college football programs, right? You lose games you shouldn't lose. That was definitely one of them. And Charlotte had been awful before then. But Shane Beamer told us they got their quarterback back, and they're a much different team. We'll see how that applies, if at all, to the Gamecocks on Saturday night. Also Saturday night, Arkansas, Texas A&M, SEC primetime, and another game Gamecock fans will certainly be looking at. If Arkansas goes to Texas A&M, actually this game's in Arlington, right? So it's kind of on neutral territory. I think maybe it's down on the schedule as a Texas A&M home game. So I say at here. Let's edit that real quick. Let's be accurate on the show. We'll just put versus. Is that better? Makes me feel better being a nerd. Sorry. But Arkansas wins this game in Arlington against Texas A&M. I think Gamecock fans, assuming, obviously, the most important thing is that Carolina wins and wins comfortably against Charlotte, plays well, plays clean, plays smart and efficient football that Shane Beamer said the other day they just haven't done yet. They haven't played well. First of all, you got to play well. Secondly, you want to see some other things, some other kind of tangential things, right? Teams you've played, you want to see them look good. Arkansas didn't look good last week. Missouri State goes in, has a lead in the fourth quarter. The fighting Bobby Petrino is going to get revenge and carry off a neck brace in Fayetteville as a memento of the big win. Sorry, couldn't help it. But they did come back. They returned a punt for a touchdown, big part of a 21-point fourth quarter. They won the game. So you can dismiss that, I think, if you go see Arkansas running the ball effectively against Texas A&M, limiting an offense that's not very good so far this season in the Aggies. Max Johnson doesn't look very good, but if Arkansas gives up a bunch of passing yards and continues to be the 131st ranked pass defense, and the Aggies win that game, knowing that they're still left on Carolina's schedule, it doesn't make you feel better for sure. After that USC loss to the Citadel sealed his fate, Sean Elliott, you're talking about, Roger? Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if you could go back and do it again, I think Ray Tanner would absolutely have kept Sean Elliott on instead of hire Will Muschamp. Who knows? Poor Craig. When was our last good drive? I'm being serious. Can you remember one? The Arkansas game, they moved the football a bunch. Now, most of the time it was because of explosive plays, I think, Craig, is kind of what you're saying. A good drive you might be defining as matriculating the ball down the field consistently. Oh, yeah, another one. Rogers going back to the old hire. Brings a hypothetical question. They were after Tom Herman hot and heavy back then. Would he have done any better than Muschamp? Sure wasn't great at Texas. Hard to believe that he would have, right? And I would argue that with some extenuating circumstances, some off-field drama there at Texas, that maybe the infrastructure would not have been as sound at South Carolina as it was in the Muschamp era. And yet Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech, that didn't work out well either. So the guy that was mentioned in that search back in the day, that clearly has gone on to the only guy that has gone on to have a good following few years, Rich Rodriguez, another guy, didn't work out well at Arizona at all. He could have done it. Could have been worse, Roger. It really could have. Yeah, and Craig saying, well, Kirby Smart could have had him until Georgia swooped in. All right. But the one that was actually mentioned at the time, I thought was kind of way out of left field and his resume at the time didn't compare to those other guys, was Lincoln Riley, right? And now you see what he's become. Crazy. That's why I always shake my head at these super confident hot takes these days that absolutely you know that this is going to be a good hire, and that's not so much of a good hire. And you don't know, man. Everybody thought Chad Morris was going to, a lot of people thought Chad Morris was going to work out at Arkansas, and a lot of people said, Sam Pittman? How's he going to win games? Clearly, could not be much more polar opposite results since we're talking about Arkansas. Now, the Jimbo Fisher situation, that's going to be fascinating to continue to follow, especially if Arkansas can win the game. Anthony, a lot of hypotheticals going on here today. I love it. Attaboy, Anthony. Yeah, and I think that adds to, though, the bitterness, right? Your bitterness, Craig, watching Kirby Smart do what he's done, and especially this offseason. You win one national championship, great season, deserve it. LSU, for instance, right? A season for the record books, and then it all falls apart. But Kirby Smart told us all offseason the program wasn't built for a one-year run, built for sustained success. And this year's team hadn't done anything. And that's the message, and they're playing like it. And it doesn't look, especially knowing that Kirby came from Nick Saban, how Nick Saban has been able to replicate it. If anything, seemingly only strengthen that program year after year after year. Ooh, that hadn't been the case in the East. What, since Urban Meyer was there, really? And the Urban Meyer roller coaster was was still up and down and obviously kind of crashed and burned towards the end. Lose 15 players to the NFL and you are dominant. Still so impressive. Yeah, that's part of, well, I think, what has Craig so salty now. There definitely is that. And also, Craig, I think, was disappointed that we didn't jump on the Missouri and Auburn train yesterday and get Eli Drinkwitz fired after this sucker if Auburn wins it. Just messing with you, Craig. Couldn't. I had to take the shot. The shot was there. Couldn't resist. York, morning to you, sir. He says, hey to the UFA gang here. Yeah, and that's exactly right, Craig. 8 years of top 5 recruiting will get you that. Troy, resident Clemson fan. Georgia has a built-in advantage. Number 1 school in a talent-rich state, no doubt. All right, Craig. Glad to see we schooled you up there a little bit, or yeah, no doubt. Brian Harsin might get Herm Edwards after that game. Missouri wins. He might not make it to the locker room with the job. Very true. But again, this is nothing new. Everybody saw this coming going into the season. Brian Harsin gave some great quotes, said, yep, they came after me. It was personal, me and my family. We got stronger because of it. Tank Bigsby's up there on the SEC Media Days set with the SEC Network crew talking about, yeah, we didn't leave. Nobody transferred out. We believe. It was a great story, great narrative. And then Penn State comes into the Plains and embarrasses you. Problem. All right. Thanks for the awkward pause there to blow the nose. Hopefully the mute button worked there for you. Let's get back into some more Marcus Satterfield talk, shall we? Because I mentioned crisis of confidence. I think Clemson fans have, the Clemson football program has right now in its quarterback. That is a much better issue to have, I think, than having a crisis of confidence in your offensive coordinator. While there is a new offensive coordinator at Clemson and Brandon Streeter does have plenty to prove, well, Dabo Swinney's already proven that he can go from one successful offensive coordinator in Chad Morris to the next iteration of the offense or the next regime, the next guys who are in charge, and giving Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott kind of co-offensive coordinator titles, and they just got better. If anything, they got better. And then after Jeff Scott left and Tony Elliott's there, obviously last year didn't work out well, but promoting from within, you assume that everything is going to, from a structure standpoint, be very, very similar, and you can keep it rolling, much like Nick Saban has been able to do with countless coordinators in and out that revolving door, because nobody wants to work for that guy longer than about 2 years because they hate their lives, I think, is the reputation. But that's what I'm talking about. So if you have the crisis in confidence in quarterbacks, you switch quarterbacks, the offense should be great, right? Offense can hum. Is just the wrong trigger man, as Corey Miller might say. If you don't have the right guy drawing up the offense, setting up the offense, getting the offense into position to make plays, well, then it doesn't matter who's quarterback, right? I think that's where Gamecock fans are. Preseason Heisman Trophy favorite going into last year. Spencer Rattler has looked a lot like Luke Doty has looked, like Perry Orth looked, like Jake Bentley looked. Like quarterbacks who just aren't anywhere close to elite in college football. And then I think Gamecock fans watch, and you're like, hey, man, I don't blame that guy completely. He didn't have much of a chance a lot of times. The most interesting part of the conversation I've heard this week from the Gamecock coaches is Shane Beamer talking about Spencer Rattler has to step up in the pocket. He has to stay in the pocket more. He's got to trust the pocket more. He can get better there. Well, I think all Gamecock fans would then raise their hands and say, you got to be better at giving him a pocket, man. He didn't have one against Georgia State. How could he trust that he was going to have one against Georgia? I understand where he's coming from. We've seen these guys get smashed a bunch of times in the last several years. Again, not all Shane Beamer's issue, not all Marcus Satterfield's issue. The bad Will Muschamp offenses before them. But to hear that, to hear Shane Beamer not afraid to tell us that, clearly he's talked to Spencer Rattler about that, to hear it kind of reiterated a little bit from Marcus Satterfield yesterday. Say he's excited. He keeps screwing up. And he keeps trying to fix it. To me, that's really interesting to hear. And now it will be really interesting to see how the Gamecocks respond. Again, kind of weird that you're not going to get a ton of credit for it against Charlotte. You're not going to get a ton of credit for it against South Carolina State in the next 2 weeks. Dabo pays his assistants so well that he's been able to hang on to them longer. Not just that, though, Roger. They've earned it. They performed. And when you're making $2 million a year like Brent Venables was, yeah, why not hang out until you can be the Oklahoma coach? Be interesting to see how Venables does in the long run at Oklahoma, not just one season, for sure. Troy says if Brent learned from Dabo and hires good people to run the offense, I think he'll do well at Oklahoma. Yeah, but it's so crazy, right, to go from such an offensive-minded coach to a defensive one. But you're right. But that's kind of the exception in college football. Alabama, Clemson, even Georgia fans would say that the coordinator roles haven't been great under Kirby Smart in the last 5-ish years, right? Or his entire tenure there. Right, Chris, how can you stay in the pocket when there isn't one? So I think I understand. You got to coach up your quarterback. You got to improve. Things have got to get better. And maybe the offensive line is improved for the Gamecocks. Maybe Shane Beamer's right. Says nobody's talking about the offensive line. I thought they were much better. Maybe that's why Marcus Satterfield is telling us how close the offense is. But then there's also the mindset of throwing to Kerryon Joyner out in 3rd and 7. Is that exactly what it was against Georgia? You haven't really seen him all year, and then all of a sudden you're throwing the guy who was your MVP in the bowl game, couldn't miss, perfect 9 for 9. Well, we hadn't seen him hardly at all this season. And you see him on 3rd down against the number 1 team and defense in the country, and it doesn't work out well. Why was that? Here's the answer from Marcus Satterfield yesterday.
I wanted to get to it really early on 3rd down just because they are going to bring some simulator pressures. And I wanted them to be thinking, what the heck are they going to do on 3rd down? I wanted to see if we could kind of calm them down a little bit. The gap schemes, plays like that have been good for us on 3rd downs. The week before against Arkansas, they double mugged us and we ran the counter for a touchdown. So those things are always, somewhere sprinkled in the game plan, but we knew we wanted to get to it early. And, that play had a pass option to it. They walked the linebacker out. We had numbers in the run game. We just got a little bit condensed on the kick-out block.
Wow, huh? I don't know about you guys. I had the Muschamp flashback when they go into coach land, start speaking coachese. Like, that's not coach speak. That's coachese. That is X's and O's. That was simulator pressure, double mugged us, got condensed. Like, it's just X's and O's vernacular. And again, I said it earlier. I don't think the aptitude, the intelligence, the wealth of knowledge is being questioned by Marcus Satterfield. I take that as an absolute guarantee when I hear a guy like Eric Kimry tell me it's kind of intimidating how much the guy knows about football, offensive football. But when you have to explain it in those technical terms, and Will Muschamp kind of went there every now and again with the overhang defender and the whole thing, you just feel like maybe it's a defense mechanism, or you're doing also what I talked about earlier. Maybe you just live in that realm like high-level college professors do, and you can't explain it any other way. Like, how would Steve Spurrier have explained that? I think it'd be fascinating. Like, yeah, I wanted to do something different, but it didn't fool Georgia, and it didn't work. It was dumb. Dumb move. Yep, shouldn't have done that. Next time we'll figure out something else. And Satterfield himself brought up last week the quote, genius is in the simplicity, right? The sign of true genius is simplicity. There wasn't much simplicity there in that explanation other than they were trying to be creative. That's basically what he said, right? It's not that the execution is in doubt. The execution has not been good, Chris. Craig like double mugged, lockout, block, nub side. Yeah, the nub side. Forgot about the nub side. Well done. So Roger looks like he's telling Troy that good coaches learn they don't have to run the whole show. No doubt, man. Off the subject, Troy says, I'm interested to see Amazon's ratings this week versus last week with a decent college game tonight. Okay. Interesting. I don't know if ratings really even apply anymore. Those things are so weird, right? We all buy it like, oh, wow, so many million people watch this game. I don't know if you can trust all those numbers. Maybe that's just me being a conspiracy theorist. What's your decent game tonight, Troy? Let's check this out. Not in the top 25. West Virginia, Virginia Tech. Decent game for sure. In Blacksburg, going to have Inner Sandman going. I like it. And I love these type games too. West Virginia is actually favored on the road here, even though they're 1-2. Virginia Tech lost to Old Dominion earlier this year. West Virginia lost to Kansas in overtime. Obviously lost that backyard brawl. Was that in overtime too? I think it was. But JT Daniels been playing well. JT Daniels has numbers that I thought Spencer Rattler would have. And maybe they are similar, actually. I should probably look those up. It's the touchdowns that definitely won't be. He's got 6 touchdown passes I'm seeing, 753 yards. Well, let's look up Spencer Rattler's numbers before I go on too much of a rant there. The numbers actually haven't been awful. Let's check out Spencer Rattler's numbers as I scroll down. Yeah, 722 yards, so very similar pass attempts, pass completions, yardage. It's a 3-to-1 ratio talking about touchdown passes. Spencer Rattler has 2 through 3 games. 4 picks. Not the ratio you're looking for, right? Unfortunately, one that Gamecock fans have seen a bunch. Just scrolling up, Stetson Bennett, 952 yards passing. Sorry about that. 5 touchdowns. Will Rogers, 977 yards passing, 10 touchdown passes. Hendon Hooker, 844 yards, so just about 100 more than Rattler, but 6 touchdown passes. Just going through SEC other quarterbacks there. Give you some perspective of where Spencer Rattler is. DC, I couldn't learn anything from somebody like that. That's a bit unfair, talking about Marcus Satterfield and how he explained what he was explaining. Troy says, I know the NFL is boss, but some, myself included, will watch college. And I always go into those things 50-50. Like, I'll watch whatever game starts first. As long as it stays good, I'll probably stay there. And in commercials, I'll flip to the other game. If the other game gets better, I'm going to stay there. I am on a Thursday night. I'm typically 50-50, but sometimes the games will dictate that. I don't even know the NFL game tonight. I think I should, because my kids were telling me about fantasy football. They're all into it. Let's see who we got tonight. I want to say it was the Browns. Yeah, Browns Steelers. So it starts at 8:15 on Amazon. I'm certainly going to already be the college game will kind of tell me whether I'm going to stick with it or whether I'm going to be a little bit more interested in Steelers Browns. I like that they do start at different times. They'll probably end actually about the same exact time, with college games going usually at least 45 minutes longer. But I don't have much of a stake in Steelers Browns. So I imagine I'll probably watch more of the college game tonight too, as long as it stays competitive. but I'm a game dependent kind of guy. Is Georgia State Coastal tonight? Is that right? ESPN 2, 7:30. Roger's letting us know. Okay. Good to know too. So I'll definitely be checking that one out as well. And yeah, Steven, good point here. Is Matt Rule our offensive coordinator? LOL. There has been a bit of a parallel. I saw the quote come out yesterday. If anybody thinks there's a loser mentality in the building, they're absolutely wrong, from Matt Rule. Obviously, the heat is way turned up on him after an 0-2 start with the Panthers and what that season was going in, and knowing that he and Marcus Satterfield go way back, right? He was the assistant offensive line coach for Rule. It's not working out. Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers. It's just not. It's not working out with Marcus Satterfield running the Gamecock offense. I would say, I don't know, who's it not working out for most? Well, most people in the football world don't even know who Marcus Satterfield is outside of South Carolina. People do know who Matt Rule is, and I think that is a much larger story. I'd say they're very similar right now. Very similar. Good to know. Teddy D, Quail Hollow. I did know that. That's where the President Cup tees off. I didn't know it was at 1:05 today. Go Team USA. Attaboy, Teddy D. Keep us up to date tomorrow. I'm looking forward to your in-depth report to make sure unrestricted free agents know exactly how day one of the President's Cup went. Are you going? If you're not going, Teddy D, I'm a little disappointed that you're that fired up. It's in Charlotte. Got the opportunity to go. DC sleeping tonight? Going to miss all of them? Hey, man, happens. And Troy says it'll be interesting to see how Cleveland blows it this week. Poor Stuart Lake. Yeah, maybe we'll get Stuart on tomorrow, get his take on if it does happen, if he needs a little show therapy. But, I mean, they're treading water. They're 1-1. They're actually favored tonight against the Steelers. So, I mean, from a Browns fan perspective, this is almost living the dream, isn't it? Compared to other years. All right, I think I told you guys we'd run some more Marcus Satterfield stuff. All right, we haven't done this one yet. It hadn't been pretty. It was one of those press conference moments where I nod my head kind of involuntarily. Got some honesty here from Marcus Satterfield in this exchange, talking about the early downs and the Gamecock offense.
Seems like the offense has struggled on first and second to maybe stay on schedule. What, as an offensive coordinator, can you do to make sure the offense is staying on schedule and avoiding some of those second and third and longs?
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I mean, first and second down has absolutely killed us this year. And, the unique thing against Arkansas, we were really good on second and long, and we avoided some third downs. And then, the other two games, it's been first and second. If we struggle on first and second down, we're struggling to get first downs. And usually those are leading into third and 7+, third and 10, which when you're playing a couple of the teams we played recently and you're in third and 7+, you're not going to have a lot of success.
I coach flag football for 7 and 9-year-olds. When we have third and longs, we don't have much success in any level of football. I don't care who you're playing. But this goes down to kind of like the third down defense talk that drives me up a wall from a defensive coordinator talk standpoint. Like when that coaching cliche, we just got to get off the field on third downs. How about make plays? I don't care what down it is. Be good. There's never been a defense or an offense that's just really good on a certain down, but not good on other downs. No, just means you're not good overall. It's not a down thing. It's a production thing. And I think this thing can be over analytical. This happened in consecutive weeks, right? Last week, it was Marcus Satterfield saying, no, on first and second down, we're averaging 5 yards a carry. We're good there. This week, first and second down are killing us. You can't have that thing both ways. I applaud the honesty. Yes, killing you. But third down ain't helping you much either. Like, you can get away with that. And I thought that was going to be one of the bonuses of having a guy like Spencer Rattler at quarterback this year for the Gamecocks. His talent level alone, I thought, his ability to run and throw it. I mean, we saw that pass on the run in the Georgia State game to Jalen Brooks. I thought we would see more of that, and I think we saw it to some degree late against Arkansas. But I thought we would see his just natural ability be able to pull the offense up with him relatively consistently. You haven't seen that through 3 games. Maybe that was asking too much. I think in combination with the offensive line performance, and I was thinking, well, you got whipped on the perimeter in the first game against Georgia State, so maybe it's not, you can't blame it all on the offensive line. Just in coordination with the rest of the production on the offense, maybe that's too much to ask. I don't think it will be moving forward. Certainly not the next 2 weeks. Guy like Spencer Rattler should make plays against Charlotte and South Carolina State. I don't care who's coaching him. I think it's hard to screw it up as a coach when you got a guy like Spencer Rattler playing quarterback against less talented defenses. But we did see the first game, and it wasn't impressive against Georgia State. Charlotte did just beat Georgia State. Who knows? Maybe we'll learn more. We will certainly learn more about Georgia State against Coastal Carolina tonight. But I think a lot of Gamecock fans probably learned all they need to know, knowing that Charlotte just beat them. They're 0-3. The answer, the thought process here about Spencer Rattler, this question and answer thing, this was one of the strangest things I think I may have ever heard in a press conference.
How would you evaluate his play, and what's maybe next for his game as you get into these last 9?
I'm excited. Every single week he screws something up. I'm sure I've said this before, but he screws something up, and then he spends the whole following week fixing it. And then he'll screw something up this weekend, and he'll spend next week fixing it. It's just been really cool to see his work ethic and his understanding that, the good thing about him is he knows he doesn't know everything. And so he's just attacking this thing each week. Like, we know there's going to be issues, and we're going to fix them the following week. So,
all right, let's just stop it right there. Like, as he was saying that, I was like, and I do this probably way too much, but how would Steve Spurrier have approached this? I mean, can you imagine? Yeah, I'm excited. He keeps screwing it up. Maybe that's the evolution. Maybe that's the mindset you got to have if you're basing your program on love. And clearly Shane Beamer, his program is different than Steve Spurrier, and it's a different generation and the whole thing. But I mean, just imagine. And I think I said it earlier. I get it. When you're a teacher, or you really enjoy the process of seeing the improvement and seeing mistakes and then making up for them or being able to coach them up or the whole thing. But just that sentence, I'm excited. He keeps screwing things up every week. Screws something up every week. It's exciting. Wow. It's just, I think that's one of those things where you say, that Muschamp thing, not letting coordinator speak. Get it. Got it. But that's also part of the deal, right? I think Gamecock fans are still trying to get a sense to understand who Marcus Satterfield is in a lot of ways. And you get these guys get tested big time. Their character, their demeanor tested in a big way, because Marcus Satterfield knows. He understands things aren't going well. He is not being a high performer in his job right now. He gets that. Probably better than any of us, right? Right, Craig. But Sat doesn't say I screw something up every week. That's interesting, isn't it? Okay, another hypothetical. This one's for Anthony, who's loving it. Roger says, what numbers would you had projected Spencer Rattler to have after 3 games? Needless to say, underwhelming at this point, but not all on him. Now, I think the numbers are about what I expect, averaging what? 230-ish, somewhere in there per game, passing yards. I would have said if they're much more than that, South Carolina might be in trouble, and they don't have a balanced offense at all. Unfortunately, they haven't really had much of a balanced offense anyway. But those 2 touchdown passes, yeah, if you had gotten up to 2 per game and put them at 6, like that's what I thought the first game would be, a couple of touchdowns and an interception from Rattler. I thought the run game would be able to produce most of what you needed against Georgia State. Completely wrong, right? We'll be amazed if Carolina has evolved its offense somehow after 3 games and will be able to run the football effectively against Charlotte. And after the game, Shane Beamer says, yeah, we knew going into this game we're going to have some success in the run game. Man, I need to hear much more about that if that's the case, because after the game against Georgia State, he came in and said, yeah, I knew it was going to be a struggle tonight in the run game because of what they do defensively. Like, that is some tremendously interesting stuff if it were to happen there on hypothetical Thursday here for Anthony. And Chris says, yeah, I would take the yards that Rattler has, but more TDs. You just need the touchdown to interception ratio to be flipped, right? It needs to be at least 2-1 touchdowns. And you look at Hendon Hooker, who's 39 touchdown passes and 3 picks, 13-1. What Connor Shaw was 21-3, I think, one season with the Gamecocks. His last season, maybe 7-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I think you had to project with Rattler's track record that it might be a little bit higher than some. You might need to expect that if you want him to make plays that some other quarterbacks aren't going to make, he might make some plays that some other quarterbacks aren't going to make as well on both the positive and negative. Might need to give him a little bit more leash. Rattler would have had some thick skin around Spurrier here. Yeah, for sure. Everybody had to. Chris, I don't know. I can check their rushing yards. I mean, but so can you. I would guess they're negative now because of sacks. I don't remember any really long runs that would even that out. And the rushing yardage for quarterbacks is skewed because of the sack yardage there. One more from Marcus Satterfield here, and then we'll move on. I'm excited because he keeps screwing it up. And then at least he has the awareness to know that nobody wants to hear his mindset about what it's going to take for this offense to improve, to get where he wants it to be, where Shane Beamer wants it to be, where the offensive players want it to be. Here was the answer at yesterday's press conference with Carolina offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield.
Again, it just takes work. I know that's the boring answer and everybody rolls their eyes, but I mean, you just have to keep working and you have to keep getting timing together and you have to keep playing games and you have to keep screwing up and figuring out why you screwed up and getting that fixed. So I honestly, truly believe that we're getting really close based on, I mean, our kids are great. I mean, they are freaking bought into our process. They're bought into the way we practice. They're bought into our plan. I mean, they're up here all the time. They're up here last night, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, trying to bully their way into personnel groupings on third downs. I mean, we have a good time together. We work hard. We fight. We make up. We laugh. So, I mean, it's a strong, strong group. Had a great meeting today, and just, I think we're getting close. Just nobody wants to hear it. It just takes time and takes a lot of hard work.
But it also takes evidence, I think, for fans. Like, you need to see it. When it's a 48-0 game and you score 1 touchdown in the final minute against a school that you used to be very competitive with and win your fair share of games against, that's difficult to hear. right? And if you put in a bunch of work and time and effort and blood and sweat and tears through 16 games and you hadn't seen it consistently, well, how is that same equation end up with better results in game 17, 18, 19, and 20? Well, in game 17 and 18, you're playing against lesser opponents, so it better. Or the equation has to change. A large element of the equation has to change. So yeah, that's a at least he knows, because every team that I've ever covered that hasn't won always goes back and says, yeah, that was on us. We're not controlling what we can control. We got to be better doing the details. Never do you hear, oh, we're just not good enough. Those guys are just better. Or what we're trying to do, I guess Spurrier might have said that. What we're trying to do just did not work, so we're going to try something else. You very rarely hear that. That was one of the things that made Spurrier different. I've always wondered why in college stats the sacks go against yards rushing and not passing. Well, they didn't pass the ball. Makes sense to me. That was the question from Roger. Okay, so since we have dissected, probably overanalyzed, and talked maybe agonizingly too much about the Gamecock offense and its struggles, Marcus Satterfield specifically as offensive coordinator, I think all that is really fair based off of where Carolina football is, what we saw last week especially. So now, what's the plan? DC says. What about for you? What is your outlook? Like Craig's been the saltiest this morning. I know DC's been unhappy, let's put it that way. Frustrated might be the best word for Gamecock fans, right? Okay. What do you need to see to feel better on Saturday night from 7:30 to probably midnight-ish? About these games take a lot of times. What do you need to see? When you get something generic like Shane Beamer told us last week, I believe, got to be smart and efficient. Okay, but what does that look like from a quantifiable standpoint? To me, I'm talking about numbers going in here. And that's why I mentioned that 500-yard threshold. I really think South Carolina needs to get dang close to 500 yards total offense against Charlotte. You're winning this game smoke and mirrors like they won against Georgia State. You're blocking punts for touchdowns, and you're getting outgained on offense. It doesn't cut it in this game. It's not. I mean, obviously, you got to win the game, right? And I get it. Shane Beamer's not going to apologize for winning, but he also gets it, listening to him this week, that this offense needs to get right. And that's what these 2 weeks are for on the schedule. Get right offensively more than anything. You don't get right on defense. You get it with 5 starters out, right? You give up a few plays. You got an experienced quarterback for Charlotte. Okay, you give up 20 points. To me, that's what you got to see, I think, in this game at the top of the list. 500 yards of total offense, certainly scoring in the 30s or more, and 20 or less points on defense. If you don't do that, you can come in the press conference and say, yeah, we're going to celebrate this win because we don't apologize for winning. You can say that. I wouldn't advise it if I was talking to Shane Beamer. Not that he cares what I think. I don't think it would be a smart move. Chris just says 30 to 40 points is what he's looking for. Rattler throwing for 300-plus yards and 3 touchdowns. A couple of running backs close to or over 100 yards, 2 turnovers on defense. I think those are all very fair expectations. Craig going more process oriented, wants to see more 3-step drops, quick outs, slants, tight end down the seam, run the dang ball 45 times. I think that's fair as well. DC, this is a great stat too. I mean, that was the alarming thing, wasn't it? Was it 7 punts in that first game, I think? So 7 punts in the first game, 6 sacks in the second game. And then what are we going in the third game? 48-0, 59 minutes in. I think those are the stats that stick out to me this season. That tells the story. If I have to pick one thing to tell the story of the Gamecock season through 3 games, one from each game, 7 punts against Georgia State, 6 sacks you gave up against Arkansas, 48-0 until you get 1 touchdown in the final minute. But yeah, you can't punt the football, man. You got to move it against Charlotte. You got to move it against South Carolina State. Honestly, they just have to push this team up and down the field. I don't mean any disrespect, but this is a mid-major Sun Belt League team. You can't let a team like Georgia State shut you down. And they are a team like Georgia State. They just beat them by a point, right? And as coaches, we heard Marcus Satterfield talk about 3 really good defenses they played. You gave up 40-plus points to Charlotte, man. You're not a good college football defense. Roger just says you got to be much better against Charlotte. Yeah, I'm asking you, though, exactly what you need to see. And anything quantifiable, Roger, numbers-wise, on the stat sheet. It's the great thing about sports, man. Unlike other ridiculous areas in life, I'm thinking politics now, all that Vanderbilt stuff. Oh, I watched more on that yesterday. Just brutal, huh? I mean, amazing that that's where we are in life. What's gone down at Vanderbilt, I'm not going to harp on it, just is depressing. 45-23, Troy says. Okay. To me, this is less a final score issue than it is kind of a combination of process stuff, but the process that you can quantify how you get to that final score, right? Again, final scores can be misleading. That first game for Carolina, the score was not as comfortable as the final score looked. The game was not as comfortable, not indicative. I think Arkansas fans would say the final score in that game, not indicative of how much they dominated the game, had it in hand. I think that would be fair. I mean, you could argue that 48-7 final score against Georgia wasn't even indicative of the complete domination the Bulldogs put on display at Williams-Brice. Thank you, Chris. Look at that. He said he was a sound guy, and now he's looked up his own stat that he was asking about. Minus 27 on 18 attempts. I'm guessing about 10 of those are sacks. Don't have the number right in front of me. I think that's close to what it is. Yeah, and you don't want to hear we just beat a really good football team. Spurrier was usually pretty good at that, right? I mean, I shouldn't say pretty good. He was probably the best at that. You would hear what he had to say in the press conference that week. Yeah, well coached, and maybe been struggling a little area over here. After the game, you're like, yeah, we did what we needed to do there. We know that they are struggling here or there. Never forget. After Phil Fulmer's what turned out to be his last game, yeah, we all know that's not a usual Tennessee team. At least 40 points, 500 yards, hold them to 300, Roger says. Attaboy, way to give me some numbers there. Brandon, good to hear from you for the first time this morning. Definitely 500-plus yards on offense, 3 to 4 punts max. I think it's fair. And again, as the leader of the program, Shane Beamer has shown a tremendous aptitude, tremendous awareness for understanding, by and large, where the fan base is with the team and how he needs to communicate accordingly will be fascinating to see what happens here. The only times I would say that I think Shane has spoken and Gamecock fans kind of perk their ears up or tilt their heads a little bit like, huh? Really? You're thrilled to beat East Carolina by 3 on the road? Only times have been after games, I think, and celebrating wins and not apologizing for winning and the whole thing. York asks a great question. If they don't do these things, what then? Well, then I think that crisis of confidence that Carolina has right now, call it an identity crisis, whatever you want to call it, on offense, I'm talking about, continues. Your confidence cannot grow as a fan base, even as players going into SEC play. And the heat only continues, the criticism only continues to mount on the offensive coordinator at South Carolina. And then, I guess, accordingly, with the head coach to end up making a change there. That's how I see that. Now, you can't stop the criticism or pressure, or you can't reverse it, I should say. You do these things against Charlotte, against South Carolina State the next 2 weeks. That's not reversing what has happened to this point. You can pause it. I think that's the best you can do the next 2 weeks, right? You press pause on a trend headed in the wrong direction offensively, a program headed in the wrong direction, especially offensively. Yeah, TC afterwards want to hear, we killed them. The opportunities will be there. You got to make the plays. You got to not just make plays, you have to dominate your opponent. And that can be difficult for teams to live up to, right? I mean, I think South Carolina fans, due to a certain degree, still have the mindset that the program plays up and down with the level of competition. How many times did you have to see Steve Spurrier's teams against Wofford struggle to wins to get to that conclusion? I'd say there are some examples, and I think being able to play up to the level of competition just hasn't happened in so long that maybe that mindset is gone to some degree. But you got to be able to take care of Charlotte much better, much more comfortably than you did against Georgia State 3 weeks before. I think that's very fair. You just got to play better. You got to, that's smart and efficient and crisp and clean. You got to hear some of those adjectives after the game. Chris says, even if we come out and completely blow these teams out, it won't stop the criticism of Satterfield because it'll be that we're supposed to beat them. No, well, Chris, you are a miserable person if your team, if South Carolina right now in 2022 gets a blowout win and you criticize the offensive coordinator still after the game, you're kind of in a miserable spot. I think you have way too much Muschamp baggage. You got to find some joy, like Shane Beamer would say. You might want to find a different hobby. Now, will there be some negative comments, or will it be 100% glowing reviews? Maybe from that standpoint, I understand what you're saying. And I know you're not saying yourself, but I'm saying on the whole, if you're critical of a blowout win, well, then you need to be ignored because you're just going to be critical. But that's why I say it's not going to reverse the criticism of Marcus Satterfield, but I do think it can stop it or at least pause it for 2 weeks. I think pause is the right word. Maybe it won't stop the criticism there, Chris. Maybe you're right. But yeah, that's where you got to be aware as a head coach, even an offensive coordinator. You got to know the expectation of your program, and those guys know it, right? I mean, this is almost the reverse of the Steve Spurrier mindset. If Shane Beamer's coaching Carolina fans up to enjoy wins and celebrate wins against East Carolina and Troy and Georgia State and then Charlotte and South Carolina State. That is the anti-Steve Spurrier approach to saying, hey, don't encourage those guys. They just lost a game. I know that Auburn was in the top 5, but that's not what we need fans to do. And now you get the bipolar opposite, like, hey, come on, guys, find some joy. We just won the game. That's a weird spot for a fan base to be in, isn't it? But Shane Beamer was there for the Steve Spurrier era, so it does help. I think it helps him to be able. It should help him to be able to strike the right tone to send the right message, or at least to avoid doing the other. We'll see. Roger, if they struggle the next 2 games, in my opinion, you got to make a midseason change to offensive coordinator. You've got 6 SEC games in Clemson, not a bunch of podunks. Well, maybe Vandy is. No, Vandy is not. I mean, I get Vanderbilt has been what they've been in the SEC, but they also nearly came in and won the football game last year at Williams-Brice. That's the thing that we don't know about, Roger. We don't know Shane Beamer's mindset on that. We don't know. I mean, when's the last time that's happened? Even in the Muschamp years, did that happen? It didn't happen midseason, did it? No, we saw the opposite at the end, I guess, right? With Mike Bobo taking over as the interim coach. I got no clue if Freddie Kitchens would run an offense anywhere close to what Marcus Satterfield is trying to do. So I went back. I guess the last time this happened is when Steve Spurrier jetted, right? You saw Sean Elliott, G.A. Mangus really take over the offense, and it did look different, and it did improve. So I guess we have seen it at South Carolina in relative recent history, 2015. But that was a head coaching change and not just a coordinator change. So that would surprise me to see the mid-season change, and especially hearing how Shane Beamer is talking about the situation right now. I don't feel like if the head coach had that expectation, then you would hear him say, hey, we sat the offense down after this Georgia game and showed them, hey, we're close. Make a play here or there. Make one guy miss here or there, then it's a different story on offense. Maybe Shane is just that guy and is going to be publicly supportive until he can no longer employ his assistant coaches. I don't know. This is all part of the learning process. I don't know if he knows. But we are going to find out. And the next 2 weeks certainly are important in that way. And that's why I put those expectations where I put them. 500 yards of total offense, getting the high 30s, 40s from a point perspective, keep Charlotte 20 or fewer, win the game convincingly. Rinse and repeat with South Carolina State. Then you've stopped the bleeding, you've gotten right, you're ready to move forward through a 6-game SEC slate and then Clemson. And I think you've at least kept your fan base from thinking you can't compete against a bunch of those teams. It's not ideal. To me, this season was never going to be ideal unless you pulled a road win out like the program hadn't seen in 21 years, beating a West opponent who's ranked on the road. And then you knock off number 1 Georgia at home, and you somehow go 3-0 miraculously. It was never going to be easy for Shane Beamer year number 2. It was never going to be an easy start. Never going to be easy in the SEC, you could say in general, right? But especially how this year set up, it wasn't going to be easy. But South Carolina made it more difficult on itself by struggling in game number 1 offensively. And so now you got to get that right. You got to kind of make up for that deficit, I think, in a lot of ways offensively, just to get back to even, just to get back to, hey, this team can be a 7-5 bowl eligible team, even 6-6, I guess, at this point. So that's what the next 2 weeks are, in my opinion. For Marcus Satterfield's opinion, maybe it's 2 more weeks for Spencer Rattler to screw things up and for him to be excited about it. Oh, did I do this? I don't think I played this one comment about not being able to start the game well. Maybe I did, but I think in a juxtaposition kind of way, we'll let that be our final comment today. Marcus Satterfield yesterday on these slow starts that the offense continues to have.
We just had to go and relax and attack people. I think that the Arkansas game, we started and then we had that one penalty and sputtered a little bit, but we got the ball moving, utilizing some tempo. I think those are some things that we can do and we'll continue to do moving forward. But it's going to happen. And we've had 2 really good weeks of practice. Had a good practice today, so don't know when, but we're getting close.
Relax and attack. I don't know if I've ever heard that before. It's part of the dichotomy, right? It's why I mentioned the identity crisis last week. Got to be creative and yet simple. And Perry Orth did explain to us last week how you can actually do that. And it did eventually make sense. Initially, seemed like 2 opposed ideas. Hey, who are you going to emphasize on the offense? Well, name every position. That's a problem. It's a tough spot to be. And again, last week, no offensive coordinator in the country is going to have a bunch of answers for Georgia this year. But then watching Arkansas give up a bunch of points to Missouri State, say, well, maybe you don't give Carolina as much credit as you did initially by going and putting up yards and points against the Razorbacks defense that's now dead last in all of college football and pass defense. Chris says we need to work on tempo, getting the ball out quicker this weekend. Roger's done. The next 2 weeks are critical. Y'all have a great Thursday. Hey, and remember, if you're piecing out right now, have it in your head. Help us out tomorrow. Show picks. We figured out how we're doing it now. All right, we're going to pick 5 again. 4-1 in our first week. Coming up with show picks, a consensus 5 picks against the spread, 4-1. That's the standard now. We go 4-1. This show is going to be most popular show on the internet amongst the degenerate gamblers out there. I wouldn't think so, Craig. I wouldn't think so. Trust us a little better tomorrow, LOL, Chris says. Well, you've earned it now. You've earned a little leash. You've earned a little trust. I don't know. We'll see. I didn't trust. I didn't feel great about 5 road favorites as our picks in week number 1 of our picks last week, even though it was week number 3 in college football. I will trust you a little bit more tomorrow, Chris. I don't know if that's a good thing necessarily. Roger says, ironically, I visited Nashville last year, left the next day after we barely beat them, went by the Vandy campus, night and day difference in facilities, except their baseball stadium's pretty nice. Yeah, it's why I don't consider it really an SEC school. Chris says, have a good one. Fellow Gamecocks, Roger would love GA as an offensive coordinator. Oh, man, 3 weeks in. That's where Gamecock football fans are. I get it. And I appreciate you getting the show. However you did. And however you do. It is greatly appreciated. Please continue to like, subscribe, comment, the whole thing for all of you guys, especially that were commenting today live. Craig says, Jay Mangus gets it. You got to be good at something. Got to major in something. He says he's heard Chuck Reedy say that as well. Yeah, well, I think Marcus Satterfield gets that. The question is, can he get it out of his head, get it out of his players, and then show us, get it out 7:30 Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium against Charlotte. How's that for a dramatic conclusion of the September 22nd edition of Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent? See you guys tomorrow.